Hey, good morning everybody. Welcome to the channel. So this morning I'm going to do something a little bit different. I had one of my users, one of my subscribers, actually make a comment on one of my videos that really was, it brought to light something about my channel that I think I need to make sure that I cover. You know, I'm in the how-to and style section, and that's kind of what I designate my channel as, a how-to draw. But what I've done through the progression of my channel is really kind of settle into a rhythm of just drawing and talking. So what I'm going to do this morning is a little bit different. What they asked for were some tips and tricks to help better their drawing process. And I'm going to do my best to do that this morning in my warm-up. I'm going to draw a couple faces, and through the drawing process, I'm going to actually describe kind of my thoughts whenever I'm putting pencil on paper and whatever else I can think of while I'm doing it. So hopefully this will help that particular individual and anybody else that watches the channel with hopes of improving the drawing process. So enjoy. Okay, so I'm drawing on the Bristol board today. For those of you who are familiar with Bristol board, it is a great type of paper that's got a really, it doesn't have a lot of tooth to it, tooth being the texture of the paper itself. So whenever you draw on the paper, it's very smooth. Choosing white to show contrast this morning and using the Koh-i-Noor woodless colored pencil. So I will not be able to erase with this. Okay, so one of the things that this person, just like I iterated in the intro, was they were looking to improve their drawing process. One of the things that I did early on in my drawing process and learning how to draw was to draw a lot. And I know that's, you know, you think to yourself, well, obviously to draw a lot, but what it does is it helps the connection between what I'm seeing on the paper to what I'm trying to, you know, bring forth in my imagination and also connect to my hand. So whenever I'm drawing, I'm not thinking of the exacting procedure of the drawing process. So it's kind of like muscle memory. You know, they always say that riding a bicycle, you know, we've all heard this, riding a bicycle, you never forget how to ride a bicycle. And the reason why is because that muscle memory, after you learn the balance, you learn, you know, all those things in perpetual motion, in, you know, in physics and all those things in your brain, it becomes a feeling. And you know when you're going to fall over, you know when you're going to turn, you know, all those things. And basically what I'm trying to say is, in drawing, it's very similar. What I'm trying to do is create a muscle memory and try and, you know, express myself on the piece of paper in such a way that you know, I don't have to sit there and concentrate on the line and sit there and draw the line. You know, there are so many different methodologies, and everybody's going to be different of how, you know, they draw. So that magic bullet or that magic, you know, that magic pill or whatever you're looking for, unfortunately doesn't exist. What I'm doing right now, and this particular character is going to be having their mouth wide open, kind of like yelling, screaming. And, you know, I'm trying to get the expression right. So I'm thinking in my brain, what can I do to really show that expression kind of over the top, right? So I've got the neck elongated, okay? Then I want to have, you know, it helps to have a mirror off to the side, which I do. And I sit there and I'll stretch my face. I'll stretch my face and I'll look at myself and I'll show what muscles in my face are stretching and what is happening to my face. So I see my eyebrows go up, okay? And then I'm going to see that, you know, they go way up. Doesn't really affect my hair, except in the effect of maybe this hairline goes way up. And I'm gonna have their mouth come down. And I notice whenever my mouth comes up, it's got this shape. Comes up, right down. Okay. And there's a principle in animation. It's called squash and stretch. So basically, you know, squash and stretch has to do with forms, and kind of like clay. Like if you were to take clay and you were to stretch it, or if you were to take, you know, the same amount of clay and you smash it in. And you can look, I look at my wrist a lot of times and I think wrinkles and how, you know, whenever I fold it in, and you can see whenever I stretch it out, it becomes skinny, but whenever I fold it in, it squashes into a squashed form. So I use those things and those ideas whenever I draw. And that helps me think, oh, yeah, this particular, you know, comes down, and I'm going to have that little bit of a bottom lip come around here. There we go. I'm going to stretch that neck a little bit further. I'm going to have this come out, down. Okay. So now I've got kind of a template and a blueprint for what I want to do in the drawing. And I'm always thinking, you guys, of 3 dimensions, okay? So 3 dimensions being height, width, and then finally depth. So let's say I have a sphere right in the center. I can have the height and I can have the width, but what makes it 3D is when I start thinking that it has volume in it, right? One of the really early examples of understanding what volume is in drawing is the, you know, that we did it all in elementary school, where we basically took a square, we overlapped these 2 shapes, and we created that 3-dimensional looking square. I remember drawing these in elementary school, and then I would always think about light. Okay, I would start thinking about light and how light casts shadows and really helps define that form a little bit better. The sooner you get this principle of 3-dimensionality in your drawing, and the sooner you understand how to draw 3-dimensional forms and shapes, it goes immediately over to this. So let's go ahead and lower this eye a little bit. I'm going to raise that eye a little bit because I want it to be, if you noticed, I've got a construction line here. So right now, even in this rudimentary form, I'm still thinking 3-dimensionality. I'm thinking squash and stretch. I'm always trying to define the expression of the character to help better define the drawing purpose. You just don't want to sit down and start drawing without a purpose, because what'll happen is, it's just like if you set out to go nowhere, then you will get nowhere, right? And you can always argue, well, nowhere is still somewhere, but not in drawing. I mean, if you start drawing, what'll happen basically, and it happens to me quite a lot, because I think I force drawing a lot when I'm not really in the mood, and I start drawing and I get to the point where I'm like, okay, why am I drawing this? What is this character? What is this character expression trying to accomplish? Especially in characters, you know. Let's go ahead and do this. So I think what the person was trying to do is to, you know, in terms of tips and tricks, my tip to you, number one, first and foremost, you know, get a purpose. Get a purpose in your drawing. Whether you're going to draw a character, whether you're going to draw for reference, whether you're going to draw, you know, something fun, funny, whatever it is, get a purpose, okay? Number two, decide on what your subject matter is, and have a clear definition of what your subject matter is. That'll help you not get lost in your drawing, okay? There's a lot of little tips and tricks whenever it comes to simplifying and doing things in your drawing that make it more attractive, right? These are things that you have to really kind of find as an artist. You know, I can't say that my particular way is the best way, and it's probably not. And that's why, you know, having that mindset of being a student is important too. So the third little tip I want to have for you is don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. Just sit down, you know, and have a little bit of fun. Try at least. You know, I think that, you know, we all sit down and we're like, this is going to be the best drawing I've ever done in my life. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It very rarely works that way, that you sit down and you have a singular purpose and you're like, this is going to be the best drawing I've ever done in my life. And it happens that way. It really doesn't. You know, I rely upon my years of experience in drawing a lot to help kind of fake things and get things to the point where I can use the other half of me, which is the skilled draftsman, to kind of help me along. I'm not sure if that makes any sense. You know, I do things, artistically speaking, especially in the drawing sense, there's steps, you know. The first step is to have an idea. The second step is to research the idea. The third step is to start executing the idea. The third step, or the fourth step, is to refine the idea. And the fifth step is to finish the idea, at least to the point where, you know, it's acceptable at that point in time. Could you sit there and draw and draw and draw and draw and draw on a piece for hours and hours? Yes, you can. But you have to remember there is a point where, as an artist or an illustrator, you have to kind of weigh your time with your effort and say, hey, this is finished, not perfect. That's kind of where I am right here. This is finished, but not perfect. Could I go and ink it and do all of that and make it, you know, incredibly detailed? I could put pores in his skin, you know, but right now, since I'm just trying to get a point across, this is finished, not perfect. Okay. You know, moving on to, you know, expressions. A clear expression is something that we all want to have in our drawings. You know, I've recently watched the making of Frozen 2 on Disney Plus, which I highly recommend. And they didn't have a final script in play whenever they started the movie. They kind of went on an existing you know, an existing idea and moved forward, and you could see the struggle through the writers, through the artists, through the animators, and all of that, because they didn't have a definitive story, and they were hoping that as they progressed through, that the story kind of ended up where they wanted to be. And it did, but it was hard. You could see it on the faces. And, you know, animated features, they all change as, you know, as you progress through the whole process. But it's always good to have a clear idea and kind of a roadmap to where you're going, so you don't fail. And what happens if you fail, and this happens in drawings too, you start using those failures to kind of tear down your perception of your abilities. You know, you're like, I suck today. Well, you might suck today, but you don't, you know, suck altogether. So basic shapes. So I start out with basic shapes, and a lot of times I have that sculptor's mentality, you know, the sculpting. I use my drawing as kind of sculpting. I sculpt the forms out, right? I use the basic shapes to kind of bring together the idea that I have in my head. And then as I go through, I just start sculpting and feeling the forms out. I'm not drawing on a flat piece of paper. I'm sculpting the drawing, living, you know, that living entity, and thinking how I can, you know, make it more realistic, how I can make it better. And sometimes it works. You know, a lot of times I fail, but I don't let those failures destroy my outlook of, you know, drawing in general. If you notice, I start out with a very light sketch, not pushing down on the line work, not really pushing, you know, hard, and doing, you know, doing those marks on the paper to kind of give me a roadmap. So again, it goes back to that whole idea of building. It's like you're building, you know, you're building that lattice work. Trying to simplify as I go through and clarify, you know, clarify those images. And too, you know, even in this early stage, you know, putting items in the placeholders helps me with the overall look of the drawing. It helps me look at the drawing in such a way that I can kind of feel my way through. You know, recently, you know, I was in the dark and I was like, man, I can't see a thing. Excuse me. And, you know, thinking, I know my way around this room. I've been here 100 times, but unless I have some type of roadmap, you know, provided, you know, by my phone, I can see, I'm going to end up stumbling. And that's the same thing happens, you know, for me in drawing. I have to put down my roadmap, and a lot of times it's a mess. It's a scribbly mess. But the roadmap helps me flesh out anatomy. It helps me define things a little bit better as far as expression goes. And let me get this in right here. And literally that roadmap, see, now that I've got a little bit of the expression there, I can start defining things a little bit better, like the nose, and where the nose is. Maybe the nose is a little bit longer to help define that silhouette. The silhouette being the outline of the image, recognizable without any definitive markings on the inside. So if he was completely black, then I could define him as a head and a face. And based upon the simple design that I have with the tilted head going forward, the kind of up shoulders, you can see that the emotion is kind of somber. Okay, so let's go ahead and define the mouth here. Let's get that chin. And you know, this character is, in the context of the drawing, he's kind of a weaker-willed character. He's got a small chin, got a larger head for thinking, so he thinks a lot. Kind of a smaller neck. Not really a brute. You wouldn't define him as a brute. If you ever notice in movies, and this happened, I'm rewatching some of the old 2000s programs that I used to love to watch, you know, in the 2000s. And one of them being Alias with Jennifer Garner. And Alias is a really great example of using different character types, and you know, those they have the classic character types. You have your kind of seedy, weak person, but also is really devious, kind of a snake. And then you have the brutes, you know, very easy to define. You know, maybe they're a CIA person that has a lot of muscles, so they use their brute strength to you know, get things done. And then you have somebody like Sydney, who is, you know, very beautiful, but also very dangerous, kind of like that La Femme Nikita character that was developed for La Femme Nikita. And that character has been used over and over again. You know, you look at somebody like Black Widow, who is beautiful, yet very dangerous. And let's get a hair part here. Okay. I'm talking to you guys. I'm losing my roadmap here. My pencil's going in. So you have these character types that basically clash with each other. And I really enjoy that show a lot for the action. It's kind of like watching, you know, a James Bond movie with a female. It's really cool, you know, a really great show and a great story developed by J.J. Abrams. If you haven't seen it, it's on, I believe it's on, I'm watching it on Amazon Prime, but I'm sure you could find it in other places as well. Okay. So if you guys watched, basically I started out with my basic form, okay, my basic lines, and then I used that as a roadmap to define the form, and then I started, in my brain, I started thinking expression. What is this expression? What is the quick read, right? You always want to have a quick read on your character, whether it be through facial expression, whether it be through body attitude and adjustment. You always want to have that clear definition of what the character's trying to do. A quick read is the best read, right? You know, look at something like Star Wars. You know that the Empire are evil. Why? Because they're dressed in black or gray or something along those lines with really sharp. And Darth Vader's very, you know, he's very bad because he's got this character design that defines him as bad. You know, he's got triangles and black and lifeless eyes, and those things read very clearly. And you have, you know, Luke Skywalker, who's blonde, who wears white. His lightsaber is blue. I mean, all these things are very clear in the context of the story line. Whenever you start getting into trouble with character types, whenever you start having unclear, you know, character design coupled with unclear character motive and character actions. A really good example of this would be Predator. So, you know that the guys were kind of like mercenaries, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. And then he was dressed in, you know, in such a way that's real muscular and hard to define. You want him to be good because you know him in other movies. But as he moves through, you know, doing things, killing people, you know, but using humor in such a way that it puts you at ease, but he's definitely killing people. And then whenever the Predator shows up, then you see that clear definition. You see, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger and his crew as the victim, and then you see the Predator as the hunter. And the Predator has these, you know, whenever you look at him, all these sharp edges and kind of creature-looking characteristics. And then you have Arnold, which, as he progresses through, becomes more of a quote-unquote protector of his crew. So I think that's where I wanted to land up for you guys today. What I wanted to show you as far as what I go through in my brain and defining, you know, the kind of the roadmap of the characters. Now, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll sit down and I'll write, you know, character types. I'll have weak, strong, you know, smart, and dumb, you know, all these things that really help define what I'm going to do, is, you know, for the character, and the shape language that helps define these as well, you know, from circles to squares to, you know, to ovals to blobs or whatever I'm trying to define for the characters. Be loose. You know, that's another thing. One of the tips that I always try to tell people, especially when they're starting to draw, is be loose, man.
draw big shapes first and then narrow things down to define them a little bit better. You notice I didn't get into the minutia and the solidity of the line until I defined where it was. You know, in the shapes and drawing lightly and not getting caught up in the details too early. It's important that you do that, not only for your brain's sake, but also for the success sake. You know, you start having little successes here and there, and you build on the successes, especially when you're drawing something. And I think that helps me a lot as well. Now, this character, I'd probably put glasses on him. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get that. And I start thinking, okay, if he's weak, he's kind of smart, what kind of glasses? Circular glasses can kind of go both ways. You can have circular glasses to look, you know, kind of seedy, kind of scientist-y. Maybe he's an evil scientist. But if you do square glasses, you know, square at the top, let's have them down like this. And I'm thinking right now, you know, let's do this. Good. And again, drawing light helps me define on where stuff is. It helps me not get caught up in the details too early. You know, I've watched some people that draw, that have the ability to draw that first line. That's the first one they do, and that's the final one, and that is awesome. Okay, so that's the tips I have for you guys today. Hopefully you've learned something that'll help you in your drawing process. You know, it helps me too to watch others draw. That's another tip. Watch some other people draw. Watch what they do, you know, to help you find what you need to do. We're all going to draw different. We're all going to draw our own way. We're all going to draw in such a way that helps us, you know, that shows us what's the clearest, you know. Get a little bit of a shadow here. Let's say the light's coming from up over here. Let's have it come from this side. So go ahead and shadow all this. That's going to be light, dark, light, down. Okay, it's going to be in shadow here. Good. Okay, it's going to be shadow. And that's going to be shadow. Okay. Hopefully you guys got something, a couple tips and tricks this morning that'll help you out. I think that to answer that person as far as tips and tricks, I think there is no, like I said, there's no magic pill that you can take that'll make you a better artist. What it basically is learning what works best for you, but also watching others. And if you want to draw characters and stuff, really start getting into, you know, shape language, understanding expression, and drawing. You know, find what works for you material-wise, and then expand out from there. You never want to stay in one comfort zone. You want to mix things up a lot. Draw a lot. I mean, that's the thing. If we draw more, it'll train our eye to see things a little bit clearer. It'll show us the things that we know that are already in us. You know, we already have that in us. That's the frustration that happens in drawing, is we know what faces look like because we see them all day. And you get frustrated when you can't express them on a piece of paper clearly, and it doesn't look right, and the anatomy's wrong. I think what it is we know basic shapes as kids and as people and as adults. If we draw a lot, if that's what you want to do, draw a lot to help kind of weed out all that misinformation that your brain has put together. You know, your brain puts things together to help fill in the gaps that maybe you don't understand at the time. And then a lot of times they're wrong. It's like if I asked you to draw a hand, you would do things in such a way that your brain it would be a facsimile. It would be an assemblage of images that you know about a hand. Looking at a hand and translating it to paper by what you see is a much better way, because what that does is it fills in those gaps with real information, if that makes sense. The real information is what you're after. And once you know the real information, then you can manipulate it in such a way like this. You manipulate the faces and characters using the simple forms to express things a little bit better. So I think that's all I'm going to show you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Please like and subscribe. And as always, we got more videos on the way. We got really cool stuff. I'm going to probably do a class or something along those lines to help teach the basics of understanding how to build the characters and you know, understanding shape language and you know, squash and stretch and gesture and movement and form and all these things that I take for granted because I've used them for so many years. But hopefully we'll be able to come up with something cool for you guys. Anyway, thank you guys. We'll see you next time. Bye. Bum ba-dum bum ba-dum 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 bum ba-dum 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 boo. Yeah.